Bill of Rights Articles 6 and 7 of our U.S. Constitution guarantee American citizens the right to due process. This right is fundamental to the freedoms we hold dear in this country. However, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2011 eliminates all checks and balances and gives the President authority to use military forces to detain American citizens under the law of war. This means detention without trial indefinitely.
The National Defense Authorization Act, signed into law December 31st, 2011. It states you may be arrested when a U.S. citizen and detained if the President merely alleges you are a threat. You no longer have your constitutional rights to legal representation. You are not entitled to a phone call, you are not entitled to an attorney, and you are not entitled to see your family. You can be held indefinitely without being convicted of a crime. Indefinitely on suspicion alone. You will not have a right to a jury of your peers. You will not have the right to see a judge. You will not have a right to make a phone call or talk to a family member. Unless Oregon has passed a Liberty Preservation Act bill. And then I must respect your constitutional rights. You no longer have the right to a trial by jury of your peers. You can be executed without being convicted of a crime. As part of being a U.S. citizen, we deserve a constitution that protects us.
Welcome to Occupy TV. I'm Camilla Mortensen, and I'm here with Ann Brahota to talk about the NDAA. And Ann, first of all, what is the NDAA? What does that stand for?
Well, the NDAA actually stands for National Defense Authorization Act, which is basically the Department of Defense budget. So when people talk about fighting against the NDAA, we really need to be specific that, we're not anti-Department of Defense budget. We're really addressing two specific provisions that were added on called Section 1021 and Section 1022. December 31st, 2011 is when they were added on and it was passed. So it was for fiscal year 2012, so it's a very recent thing. It happened just about over a year ago, during the Obama administration. Basically, what it allows is indefinite detention of U.S. citizens, which is kind of a funny term. What does indefinite detention really mean? Well, basically, it means that the military can arrest a United States citizen and take them away forever. And the biggest problem is that they can do that without charge or trial. It's actually a pretty scary thing because it goes against the Constitution of the United States. Our Fifth and our Sixth Amendment guarantee us the right to due process. We have a right to have a trial, to face our accuser directly, to address the charges that are brought against us. And basically what Section 1021 and Section 1022 of the NDAA do is just throw all of that out the window. The military has never really been allowed to police United States citizens. This is the job for our law enforcement. So that's very inappropriate. This is also the first time in U.S. history that the government has actually codified the indefinite military detention of U.S. citizens. It's just goes against the very foundation of our democracy, the very foundation of our most very basic civil rights, our civil liberties that were guaranteed under the United States Constitution, to allow the military to just come and take a citizen away without any evidence even against them. The law itself is very ambiguous. It doesn't really specify exactly who they can take away. It says that someone who is a terrorist or somebody who's associated with a terrorist organization, it's really upsetting to journalists because, could that include a journalist? It doesn't really say who they can take away. Association with a terrorist force. What does that mean? Does that mean you're a member of an organization? It doesn't say whether or not a person has to have knowledge that association was, with a terrorist organization.
So you could be associating with someone that you had no idea was allegedly or actually a terrorist, and then be taken away because you were associating with that person or that group?
Exactly, and that's why this is an issue that is very deeply disturbing to everyone, conservatives, liberals, Republicans, Democrats. We don't want something like this on the books saying that it's okay to do, because we've just had laws for hundreds of years protecting us from these kind of abuses of power.
And is terrorism the justification that was used to pass this?
Yeah, they said, if you're a terrorist, or we suspect you of being a terrorist, or if you're associated, So the thing is they don't have to know for sure if you're a terrorist. It's basically allowing the military to come arrest a U.S. citizen with a mere allegation. So they don't have to know for sure if you're a terrorist. They don't ever have to prove that you're a terrorist. You don't ever get an opportunity to have a trial. With a jury of your peers saying, yeah, we, find you guilty of this. They basically are allowed to come snatch somebody off of the street, take them away forever. And that's what indefinite means. You're gone forever. So it's basically as if, like Bradley Manning, for example, we would never know who he was. He would just have gone missing, So it's something that we just don't ever want to open up as a road that we can go down.
And it sounds like something that you would associate with some sort of military dictatorship somewhere, and yet you're saying it was passed under the Obama administration?
Yeah, and that's my point, really, with this whole thing, is how are we any better than any of these dictatorships that have done unspeakable acts against their own citizens when we allow something like this in our country? When I talk about it with people, I get a lot of people that are just in shock. It's hard to believe, it's hard to imagine. Not a lot of people have heard about the NDAA, and it's really just unbelievable. And it's true, though. And the weird thing is that Obama, he admitted that it was unconstitutional when he signed it. He had promised to veto it, in fact, and unfortunately he didn't. And so, it's something that is known within our legislature, that, it's basically taking the checks and balances away from the executive powers of the United States. We have three branches of government. We have our executive, our legislative, and our judicial, and it's basically throwing the judicial out of the window. And that's what keeps our legislative and our executive branch in check, is our judicial system,
So now you were saying it was took place back in December. Has it been used yet? Do we know if it's been used yet?
Well, that's the assumption, that it has been used. It's such a new thing that I think that there's more organization against just getting rid of the bill than there is in tracking who has been taken. Since 9/11, there are lots of organizations that have tracked all of the terrorists, that have been taken. But I don't really know of very much headway as far as, organizations who are tracking who's been arrested with the NDAA. I mean, it's a very sticky thing because, it's a matter of national security. So the amount of information, that we really have access to can be very limited.
So if someone has been taken away, as you were saying with Bradley Manning, we do know to a certain extent what's been going on, but under this, would national security be the justification for then not knowing what was going on with a person that might have been indefinitely detained?
I would think so, yeah. And the, one of the quotes that is really disturbing for me personally was something that Senator Lindsey Graham said. He was talking about, the death and detention and all of that. They were, debating on the floor about the NDAA, and he said, and when they say, I want my lawyer, you tell them, shut up. It's just like, you can YouTube this. Yeah. And I'm just like, really? I can't believe that they, are even saying this.
So, how did you become involved? You're sort of a citizen activist on the issue. How did you find out about? How did you get involved?
Well, I get my news from independent media. Mm-hmm. I watch Democracy Now! And I go on YouTube and I go on Facebook. So that's how I originally found out about the NDAA. I don't know that Fox News and ABC and all that is covering much of it. So it's something that I found out about, and it really deeply disturbed me. I mean, a lot of people are familiar with the Patriot Act and things like that, and there's been a lot of talk about, privacy issues and things on the internet, and it's just something that I found out about from, the people that I know, because I know a lot of people who are kind of politically aware, and I actually contacted PANDA, which is a national organization called People Against the NDAA, mm-hmm. and I was interested in starting a local chapter. And the thing that really motivated me actually was watching the inauguration speech, because within less than 60 seconds, I was already pissed off. And it was just Obama claiming that with his presidency he was, affirming the Constitution, and when in fact he had trashed our Constitution and trashed our constitutional rights. And so that was just an outright lie within 60 seconds of his inauguration speech. And that was kind of like a motivating thing, got me all fired up, and so I got in touch with Shane and with Colin, and we decided to form a citizens action group to make a local chapter here in Eugene, because after I contacted PANDA on the national level, I realized that Portland had a local chapter, but Eugene didn't have one at all. So I thought that it was really important, if we want to push for a county ordinance mm-hmm. or state legislation, to have that local chapter here in Eugene, because there's so many politically aware and politically active people in this community. I mean, I really feel like we have a really politically aware and active community.
So, PAN is a national organization with these sort of smaller chapters throughout the country. And what can be done then on this? You mentioned ordinances. What can be done is there something that can be done on a local level to? There
is. Yeah, there's a lot that can be done and that has been done around the country. We have 13 different states that have already introduced bills. So we actually have a county ordinance and some state legislation already drafted and in the works. And basically what that requires is that our county sheriff, when we're talking about the county ordinance, mm-hmm. Basically follow through on his pledge to uphold the U.S. Constitution. I mean, these people who have sworn to protect us are fulfilling their oath, and they're doing their job when they protect us from things like the NDAA. The NDAA is something that prevents them from doing their job, and it's basically just something that they just, it's a conflict for them if they allow the military to come and arrest people with the NDAA. So what we want to do is create a county ordinance so that it's illegal and it's a prosecutable offense if anyone cooperates with the military when they're arresting someone using the NDAA. So it's really important that we acknowledge that it is illegal for the military to come in and take people using the NDAA, and that we will prosecute you. You know, you will get a fine. There's going to be punishment. You know, you will go to jail if you cooperate with this. And then the other thing, too, is that we want to make sure that the federal government knows that the NDAA is considered null and void in our state. It's like a process of nullification that acknowledges the unconstitutionality of the NDAA, and just lets the federal government know that, you know what, the NDAA does not apply to Oregon. It's not something we want, and we're not allowing it. We know it's unconstitutional. You try to come to Oregon, we will stop you. And, you know, we want to do the same thing at the state level. So the county ordinance and this state legislation would kind of mirror each other in that way. It's making the NDAA null and void, making it illegal for the military to come in and take people with the NDAA, and prosecuting people who, you know, cooperate in any way.
So this would be a Lane County ordinance. Do you know if there's any other counties in Oregon that are also working on ordinances?
You know, we've actually gotten in touch with quite a few other organizations, and because we just started our local chapter, it's something that's still kind of in the works, but that is our goal, to get you know, other counties on board, as many as possible, really. I mean, we really just need to get the word out and let people know that we have resources that can help them. I mean, that's what the National PANDA is all about. You know, they have a legal team that comes in and helps, and they have all kinds of resources and things that, you know, ordinances that are drafted, and, you know, all kinds of things.
Do you find that this is an issue that crosses political spectrums, that appeals to, or I guess frightens more than appeals, that it frightens sort of someone who's liberal as well as someone who is more conservative, just because it is this constitutional issue? Or
well, it's very interesting. It actually is a very broad issue, in my opinion. I mean, even libertarians, you know, Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals. I mean, the thing is the United States Constitution is the foundation of our democracy. It's what everyone can agree on in this country, and that's why so many conservative people, you know, are behind opposing the NDAA, because at the very foundation of American values, this is not okay. And that's the beauty of the issue, really. And what I love about it, I think it's a very easy issue to organize on because of that. And I'm very proud, actually, that so many people are opposed to it. I really haven't met one person, actually, that thinks the NDAA is an okay thing.
And you said, in addition to the local group, you've also formed a student group as well that's working on the issue?
Yes, yeah, I have formed a student organization because I'm an LCC student, and I'm also a U of O student, so I'm dually enrolled. And I've started a local organization at LCC called LCC PANDA. You can find us if you email laneccpanda I'll say that again. You can find us at laneccpanda@gmail.com. And I hope to start a student organization at U of O as well. And that would be awesome, you know, if I could find as many students as possible to organize on this issue.
So one of the things I find interesting, so the NDAA violates the Constitution, but then again, isn't it also legally a dubious area for states and counties to try to legislate against federal legislation? Since federal law trumps state law and state law trumps county law, you're sort of throwing it back at them, taking the power back into local hands. Is that a little bit of what's going on?
Well, it has to be, because, you know, they've done something that is so blatantly illegal. We have to do this. This is the best option, really, for us to take a stand and let the federal government know that, you know, it's just not something we can allow.
And I think you mentioned early on, have there been other states have there been other states that have passed laws, or is it sort of still in the early stages where people are looking at it to stand up against
I
the
think
NDAA?
about 6 have passed laws. Montana is the most recent one,
Oh, wow,
I
okay.
believe. Yeah, you can look all that up. And if you go to pandaunite.org, www.pandaunite.org, you can see they have a map of all the states. And, there's tons of counties. And then there's some states where it's still pending, where it's gone through committee and it hasn't been passed. But, there's a process, and you can kind of track it on the national website.
And you mentioned the county ordinance. Have you had a chance to speak to the commissioners, and have they been receptive to the idea of an ordinance like this?
We actually haven't spoken to them much.
So still
yet.
early in the process.
It's very early in the process. Yeah, we really just drafted it. And so that's really what we want people to help us out with. The main thing, we want people to understand is that we have to take a stand, united as one people, as many of us as possible. Call the commissioners as many times as you can. Call them, let them know that you support this, because that's the only way that we're really going to get this passed. This is not a law that the people want, and we just have to let the government know that they have to do something. I mean, we have to call as many state legislators as we can, call as many county commissioners as we can, raise as much awareness as we can, write letters to the editor. So that's why it's really important for people to, get on our email list. We have an email list that people can get on, and we really, we won't share people's names. We're very careful about the amount of emails that we send out. We don't send out very many. We do it at really critical times. When it's time to call county commissioners, we will make sure everybody knows. And we really just want as many people to make that call and to write that letter as we possibly can.
Do you find that calling is a little bit stronger sometimes than just sending an email or signing a petition?
Absolutely, yeah. Petitions that are mass petitions over the internet have the least weight. A petition that you sign and mail in, it's not as much of an impact. And then when you make a call, that's more of an impact. When you actually handwrite a letter and you take the time to do that and send that in the mail, that's actually even more powerful.
Shows that you really care about an issue like
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, they track those numbers in their offices, and they know that when you take the time to write a letter, even though they have fewer letters, it matters more, than an amount of petitions.
Great, and people can go to pandaunite.org then to find out more about that. Great, well, thank you so much for coming in. This has been Occupy TV. I'm Camilla Mortensen. I've been here with Ann Prohoda talking about the NDAA.
Now, what can get you on the terrorist watch list? Being a Tea Party member, gun owner or activist, Second Amendment activist, militia members, Christians, returning veterans, those who believe the government is corrupt, those who are against the government's foreign policies. The list goes on and on and on. People who pronounce their sovereignty, people who are concerned with illegal immigration. You can be labeled a terror suspect for engaging in any of these activities and legally arrested, detained, interrogated, tortured, even executed under military laws of war.
Elected officials, both the Senate and the House of Representatives, have just overwhelmingly passed the National Defense Authorization Act.
President Obama, on New Year's Eve, signed the National Defense Authorization Act.
Squeezed into this military funding bill are two provisions that give the military not just lots and lots of money, but lots and lots of power.
That authorizes the president to indefinitely imprison, without criminal charge or court hearing, any suspected terrorist. Suspected.
Indefinitely detain American citizens, even those captured here in the United States, suspected, not convicted, of some sort of involvement or affiliation with terrorism.
Congress is essentially authorizing the indefinite imprisonment of American citizens without charge or trial.
The Congress and our President have just finished today removing the last vestiges of the Constitution of liberty for the sake of national security. They have destroyed the Bill of Rights today. Today marks the day that America is now turned into a battlefield, a police state.
How bad is this?
It's quite frankly absurd. I mean, here we are, 10 years after 9/11, in the wake of the demise of Osama bin Laden, the only leader that Al-Qaeda's ever known. And we're passing a provision that would codify the indefinite detention without trial of suspected enemies of the state. And that includes, as we mentioned, American citizens apprehended here on U.S. soil. We have not codified indefinite detention without trial since the McCarthy era. That's how extreme this is.
I think that denigrates the very foundation of this country. It denigrates the Bill of Rights. It denigrates what our founders intended.
And when they say, I want my lawyer, you tell them, shut up.
Your time
Don't
is
get a lawyer.
expired.
You're an enemy combatant. Death, detention, prosecution.
Whether it's the Republicans or the Democrats, they all did something horrible here in taking away an enormous part of our Constitution, and they're all guilty.
It's time to wake up.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to introduce a very simple piece of legislation to repeal the infamous Section 1021 of the National Defense Authorization Act, quietly signed into law by the President on New Year's Day. What a way to usher in the new year. Section 1021 essentially codifies into law the very dubious claim of presidential authority under 2001 authorization for the use of military force to indefinitely detain American citizens without access to legal representation or due process of law. Section 1021 provides for the possibility of the U.S. military acting as a kind of police force on U.S. soil, apprehending terror suspects, including Americans, and whisking them off to an undisclosed location indefinitely. No right to attorney, no right to trial, no day in court.
I'm Camilla Mortensen, and I'm here with Colin Farnsworth of People Against the National Defense Authorization Act. First of all, how does Section 1021 and 1022 of the NDAA affect the American justice system?
Well, it affects it in a few different ways. First off, it overturns about 200 years of law passed after the Civil War having to do with posse comitatus. Posse comitatus pretty much forbids military to police anywhere on American soil. And this is the whole reason that we have the National Guard today. they will come and during, special needs requested under the governor for more support needed than police officers than they can provide, and the National Guard will come. But even in the worst of situations, it is still illegal for these military to come onto American soil. And this isn't a new theory or a new practice by governments or central authorities. People have always been very threatened by standing armies on American soil. And so this goes back. Many different empires have done this, or the people have not allowed it. And even the Roman Empire, they forbidded standing armies within the state of Rome. And so it was such a treasonous act when you had Julius Caesar come across the Rubicon with his standing army. It was immediately seen as an act of treason and a direct threat to the Roman Senate and the Roman people. Another way that this really changes the whole American justice system is that it overturns the innocent until proven guilty that we all know and we all cherish, right? And so this burden of proof that is in our American justice system requires that people that are accusing people, the finger pointer has to be the one that provides the evidence to say that this person has committed the crime and this is why. Otherwise, we are left with kind of the witch hunt, right? You point at someone that you maybe disapprove of or you don't like, and this person, and we throw them in the water, and if they sink and drown, then they're a witch, and if they live, well, then we still burn them at the stake because they're a witch. So our whole legal system is based upon the burden of proof, and you're innocent until proven guilty, and it's up to the prosecutor to prove your guilt, opposed to you having to prove your innocence, right? Which could drain a bunch of money from you, your time. And so what the NDA does is it actually strips of all of these innocent till proven guilty doctrines and stuff that we believe in. And the Founding Fathers, they also believed that free society, this is one of the ways that they could have really oppressed the peoples through the justice system. And so they lived and they believed that it would be better to live on the side of caution, allowing maybe 10, one of the quotes that I'm roughly estimating, roughly paraphrasing it, is that they would prefer to have 10 truly guilty people escape punishment than to sacrifice having one innocent person being punished for a crime they didn't commit. And even with these safeguards that we have throughout our justice system in dealing with the burden of proof and innocent until proven guilty, we still have people that are on death row that evidence is coming out that they haven't actually did the crime that they're committed and later get off. We've actually there's proof now of people actually being executed at the hand of the state who have later come out through other testimony or DNA evidence have not committed the crime. So even with all our safeguards, we still get to the point now where we do sometimes put innocent people into prison and punish them for their crimes. But with the NDAA, if you're accused at all by the executive branch for doing any of these very vague terms that we've mentioned multiple times, if you're associated with these forces or you substantially supported terrorists or you've done belligerent acts against homeland United States, then you can just be sent away and without any due process at all. The final way that the American system is greatly affected this is our fundamental checks and balances that our federal government provides us. We have the legislative branch that makes the laws, and then we have the executive branch that can veto those laws, or they can carry or they execute those laws into effect. And then we have the judicial branch that kind of interprets how the citizens interact with these laws in very situational cases. But what we have here is we have the legislative branch who's created this law, and we're giving full interpretational rights to the executive branch to interpret if these laws are, how they're going to execute them. And then even to go one step further, the executive branch has just cut out the judicial branch altogether, not even allowing it to go to trial. You can just definitely detain these citizens, send them to any military facility, military prison around the world, and not even allow the judiciary branch to judge the innocent of proof or the burden of proof of the individual. So we don't even let them prove, we don't even give the burden of innocence to them, let alone the burden of proof on the prosecutors, which is our whole free society is based upon. So it's just a tragic loss. And that's just a few ways that it's going to drastically affect our American justice system.
So can you give me an example of how the NDAA might be carried out?
Yeah, some of the best examples would have to do with whistleblowers and oath keepers. Whistleblowers are maybe your common day citizen who either works in a public or private institution, and they come across maybe some just some illegal activity. They have evidence or video or documents that they're like, wow, this is clearly illegal. In terms of oath keepers, these are individuals of public office who have sworn an oath to their office, and more importantly, sworn an oath to protect and serve and defend the Constitution. So if these people come forward and maybe they believe that actions are committed either by the executive branch or some other branch or institution in our government or private institutions, if they come out, they might be threatened. They might be threatened that they might just disappear, right? Mm-hmm. One of the best examples of this is Daniel Ellsberg, who was the releaser of the Pentagon Papers during the Vietnam War. And what he did was extremely beneficial and changed the entire dynamic of how Americans perceive the war. And it really came out to say that the two administrations were lying to the American public and really misleading them how effective and beneficial to directly to American people the Vietnam War was. Another current case is dealing with Bradley Manning. Mm-hmm. And Bradley Manning, he was the one that released most of the documents to WikiLeaks concerning the war on terror. And he ended up spending, he's just now getting a trial. He spent 1,000 days in prison. Most of that time was in consolatory confinement, which could break potentially, Eighth Amendment laws of cruel and unusual punishment. But both these individuals, they took the risk knowing that their liberty might be at jeopardy, but they realized that both of them had a moral obligation to show some of these what they believe were crimes and clear infractions against the Constitution. And they were going to do everything in their power to just at least expose this and let the jury and the public decide if this was appropriate or not. Well, both of these cases, the executive branch held them under, basically aiding and abetting the enemies, and also held them as under the Espionage Act. So they knew this was a possibility, but they did it anyway, knowing that they're going to get a trial. Now that's before the NDA. Now after, both these people, if they were to do this again, they could potentially just disappear. There would never be a trial for them. They would just kind of disappear. Maybe the information would get out, maybe it wouldn't. The New York Times, they accepted the Pentagon Papers when Daniel Ellsberg released it, but actually now it's coming out in the court cases against Bradley Manning. He actually tried to release it to the New York Times and as well as other media enterprises, and they wouldn't actually do it this time. So I think the media enterprises are also feeling the pressure from the federal government and realizing they don't want to be held for espionage. They don't want to be held down in a huge government lawsuit. So it's not only affecting the media concern with this, but now what's the incentive for future whistleblowers to come out if they know that they won't even get their spotlight in the camera to defend themselves? They might just disappear. So it's the result of this could really just result in the fast decline into federal and corporate just lawlessness and right into tyranny. So it's extremely dangerous to get rid of both oath keepers, oath to the Constitution, as well as general whistleblowers, because this really opens up the transparency of our government and really what this nation was founded upon.
So this idea of people disappearing or being taken away by the military sounds to some viewers maybe a little over the top. So why should viewers believe your interpretation of the effects of 1021 and 1022?
Yeah, no, totally. And that's this stuff sounds so crazy and so outlandish that here's this guy saying this and like, how could this possibly be true? But the fact is that I've just done my research. I'm just really reiterating what other folks have been saying, mainly the plaintiffs in the court case right now that's going through the Circuit Court of Appeals. It first went through this federal court, but it's called Hedges versus Obama. I've talked about that earlier. But Hedges versus Obama, Catherine Forrest was the first judge. She's a federal judge from the Southern District Court in New York, and she's actually claimed and put a complete injunction, meaning she stopped this, saying that it was completely unconstitutional under the First and Fifth Amendments, and that the government can no longer use these two provisions. Now, since then, they put it through appeals. But here's a district judge, kind of reiterating what I'm saying, and I'm really just reiterating what she's saying. Daniel Ellsberg, who's a very well-known activist and reporter and just a well-informed individual. A lot of people trust him. Noam Chomsky is one of the plaintiffs as well, a well-respected historian, economist, and academic. And then Christopher Hedges, who's the main plaintiff in this court case. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and has done numerous, journalistic things around the world. And he's actually very concerned because he's the one who's actually talked to a lot of Al-Qaeda members and a lot of these associated groups. And he's just doing his proper, freedom of speech issue of dealing with just hearing the other side. Like, why are they so upset at us? Maybe if we learned why people are upset at us, we can change that and we can potentially, make things better. But the fact that he's now, reporting on it, he could be considered, maybe associated forces, or he's substantially supporting getting their message out, when really he's just doing what our country is founded on, the First Amendment of just freedom of press. So it's incredibly terrifying to see these people coming out against it and people still not believing. Another key person that also would be reiterating what I'm saying is the American Civil Liberties Union Executive Director, Anthony Romero, and I'll read his quote right after Obama has signed this into law. He says, "President Obama's actions today is a blight on his legacy because he will forever be known as the president who signed indefinite detention without charge or trial into law." So here's this very left-leaning, progressive, legal defense firm who's not even defending Obama. So even in our political tribalism, where we're all defending whatever side that we're either the Republicans are defending Republicans or Democrats are defending Democrats, here's this very left-wing progressive group who's still calling out Obama for what he's done. And then really the cherry on top is Obama's own signing statement, where he says that, yeah, this is absolutely could mean that it could be interpreted to be completely unconstitutional in terms of Americans' rights. But he promises, just like he pledged that he wouldn't sign it in November or December in 2011 before he did, he's now promising in his signing statement that his administration will not carry out these effects. So, we could take him for another one of his promises, but the truth is he's not signed by law to not interpret these in unconstitutional ways. And also, like I mentioned earlier, he's also leaving this for another administration to pick up upon. So it's a dangerous road we're on.
So what can people do about the NDAA?
And that's like the most important question that I think we should be getting at. And number one is education. Education is just completely fundamental, paramount to getting through this. And we're living in such an age where we have the most access to information. Information's all around us, to the touch of the fingers. I could Google all this, and I'm hoping people are Googling at home. That what we're talking about, looking up every single aspect, and the thing is, the downside to this freedom of information is that we're really on this battle between, I could go on Google and I could YouTube cats playing with dolls and bloopers of TV people or famous people or whatever. But the fact is, there's so much stuff we need to be doing to bring higher consciousness to our reality, right? We need to be really becoming aware of the issues. And so I beg people to instead balance their distracted time on the internet. We all need to escape looking up sports statistics and March Madness and draft and NFL draft or whatever you're into. But I beg people to balance that with actually real awareness of their own reality and a higher consciousness. And so what I hope people can do is take their mode of that best suits them in terms of getting educated. Some people are better at reading comprehension, some are better at looking at videos and documentaries, others are better at reading books or listening to books on tape or more auditory methods. Pick what's ever best for you, and I look up. Please look up these following topics. Please look up the National Defense Authorization Act as a whole. Please look up Hedges versus Obama. That's the court case going through. Please look up the nullification. It's a very, very important legal theory that Thomas Woods has done an awesome job reporting on. He's done a great book, and he's a Harvard University of Harvard historian. And then also look up the County Sheriff Project, which was founded by Richard Sheriff Mack, who took his constitutional authority as a sheriff, not wanting to enforce federal laws. He took it all to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court actually ruled on his favor, saying that the federal government could not impose federal laws that he believed were unconstitutional, because that would be a breach in the balances of power. So definitely look up those. And I have a quote here, and it says, "The most powerful weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the minds of the oppressed." So really, just reiterating the importance of education is because a lot of people wouldn't believe anything I just said about nullification or maybe the county sheriff project. So we really need to re-examine these checks and balances that we learned in our middle school or high school civics classes, and really realize that there's much more safeguards to the protection of our liberties than just this very basic, rudimentary, elementary system that we've learned. I'll read another quote, and this is from Marbury versus Madison, which was a Supreme Court case in 1803, which is, that's only 15 years after the ratification of our Constitution, and it set a huge precedence on what checks and balances are allowed in our society. And this quote right here is from one of the Chief Justices during that case, and he says, "All laws which are repugnant to the Constitution are null and void." Meaning, even if it passes all 535 different congressmen and women, if they pass a law that is unconstitutional, then it goes to the president. The president signs it into law like he has done. It still doesn't make an unconstitutional law constitutional. Just because they went through the proper mechanism, it doesn't mean it. So what we're proposing to do is build a county ordinance that actually actively nullifies, makes it null and void, does not exist, can't be carried out in our county. We can do it either through a ballot initiative, which is through a vote through the voters. We can do it a faster track, which is through the county commissioners. So if we have our county commissioners on board, we can fast track it, which would be my hope. Unfortunately, if you choose that route, they can kind of manipulate some of the language and maybe not make it as effective as possible. And then finally, this ordinance needs to be backed by your county sheriff, because your county sheriff has tremendous power to carry this out, and has also his deputies behind him to help support and defend the Constitution. Another thing that needs to be added to these ordinances is the forced reporting. If someone's confronted, they should be mandated to report to the appropriate officials, either that being your attorney general, your governor, or individuals in the judiciary department of your state legislatures. This county ordinance needs to go out to other counties, your surrounding counties. You can use it as a template. You can use it as a guide for others to speed track their efforts. And the reason I'm starting with a county ordinance is because this kind of acts as not only as a lobbying effect to it and the educational effect to it, but it also immediately protects our communities. But at the same time, we need to start working towards state legislation that would have the same provisions, the severe penalties and the forced reporting, and get our state on board. And then as a state, we can start being a template for other states to follow in suit. And because we're much more powerful as if multiple states can follow in, as opposed to just the federal government attacking one state. And we've seen this with some other legislation that's going on right now, where many states are sticking up for whatever issue that they believe is their constitutional right. Finally, I'll just say, hold our elected officials responsible. We are, no matter if they're your Republican counterparts or your Democratic counterparts, hold them responsible. And this legislation can also serve as kind of a canary in the coal mine. We can tell immediately if, because of just how brazenly this affects our constitutional civil liberties, we can tell if these public officials are just ignorant to constitutional law and a constitutional authority, or even more dangerously, just don't care to stand up for the constitutional rights of their constituents or the people in their county. So both of those are just so powerful. And I'll end with another quote from Benjamin Franklin, who said, those who give up their liberties for security will end up with neither. And I think this is what we're seeing. We totally want to be safe from terrorism, but to give up our individual liberties for the sake of security, throughout history and time of central authority, that has never come out to work out into the people's best interests. And then finally, I'll just end with just a quote from our own Oregon State Constitution, which everyone should check out, ratified in 1857, so that's almost 160 years ago. And And it will sound, as I read it, it will sound very foreign and almost radical, but the truth is that we've grown up over these last 160 years. Our generations have been growing up and becoming, maybe a little less educated on how it really was back, how our constitutional beliefs have changed through the interpretation of the General Welfare Clause and the Commerce Clause and the Necessary Proper Clauses to give way more power and in the checks and balances to the federal government than the states. And so I'll just read this, and I hope people really take it to heart, because this is the very first Article 1, Section 1 of the Oregon State Constitution, and it really just, everything else follows this. So this is very important. All power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their peace, safety, and happiness, and they have the right at all times to alter, reform, or abolish the government in such manners as they think proper. So I think it's just a very, very important and crucial quote from our own Oregon State Constitution. And many other states, if you're not in Oregon, they also have this similar wording in most of the states. And so, yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in today.
Yeah.
This has been Occupy TV. I'm Camilla Mortensen. We've been talking to Colin Farnsworth about the NDAA.
Earlier this week, the president signed the National Defense Authorization Act.
A radical new claim of presidential power.
It gives the military the power to indefinitely detain American citizens, suspected, not convicted, of some sort of involvement or affiliation with terrorism.
A bill that allows U.S. citizens to be transported overseas to prisons and held there without charges filed.
Senators John McCain and Carl Levin are looking to make America into a military state and give the president the power to be judge, jury, and executioner.
When President Obama signed the NDAA, sections of the bill were opposed by key members of his administration. Many civil liberties activists believe the law is unconstitutional.
What this bill does is it takes a wrecking ball to the United States Constitution.
It explicitly says that he has the authority to target American citizens because he believes they're bad people.
The government is claiming the power under the Afghanistan Authorization for Use of Military Force as a justification for entering American homes to grab people, indefinitely detain them, and not give them a charge in a trial.
Individual, no matter who they are, if they pose a threat to the security of the United States of America, should not be allowed to continue that threat.
And when they say, I want my lawyer, you tell them, shut up.
Your time
Don't
is
get a
expired.
lawyer. You're an enemy combatant.
There may be a number of people who cannot be prosecuted for past crimes. In some cases because evidence may be tainted, but who nonetheless pose a threat to the security of the United States.
There is one thing and one thing only that is protecting American citizens, and that's our Constitution.
Is a baseball stadium more important than liberty? Are liquor licenses more important than due process?
Please know what will come your way. Death, detention, prosecution.
It is time to stand, to peacefully bring about a revolution.
One day, somebody's going to have to say enough.
I'm the state team leader for Oregon for PANDA, and that's the People Against the National Defense Act. And kind of just to run it down to you what we were trying to do, and what we're doing as a nationwide organization, because we are a nationwide organization, is we're trying to pass legislation at a county, a city, and a state level that pretty much tells the federal government that no, you cannot come into our state, you cannot detain people indefinitely by the military. What we're pretty much doing to do that is lobbying, and that's calling your local officials, that's writing a letter to them, that's coming down and speaking to them at a commissioner's meeting, that's pretty much telling them that, hey, we're concerned citizens, you're elected officials, we want you guys to uphold your oath of the Constitution, and make sure to preserve our rights against the federal government. And these ordinances or these legislations that we're passing pretty much says that it's a crime for a federal officer to come into the state and to detain U.S. citizens without evidence, without due process. And if they try to do that, the local law enforcement cannot help them, and they're actually obligated to arrest them under maybe a misdemeanor or a Class C felony. Different states are doing it different ways. Just to run down a few of the states that have already passed that across the nation right now: Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, Montana, and Virginia. We've already passed legislation at a state level that pretty much tells the federal government we will not cooperate with the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act. Here's actually the legend that tells you the different states that have passed legislation to protect them from this. And if you notice, Oregon's still white, which means we have nothing on the board here, not city, not county, not state. What our team's trying to do, at least this year, and hopefully soon, is get something passed. Get it passed at the county level, get it passed at the state level, that protects the citizens. And one of the things, there's kind of 3 points to this. You don't just pass the legislation and expect that you're just going to uphold it. You got to make sure you've got a network of people that are informed of what the NDAA is and what the federal government intends to try to do. So you got to have this network of people. And that comes with informing and education, just like we're doing here. And then you have to get the legislation passed, and that comes with lobbying like you guys here. I will have a petition if you want to sign up. We're going to organize it in a fashion. We'll contact you when we get some legislation introduced. And what we'll need is just like 15 minutes of your time to make a phone call, to write a letter, or if you want to take it further, you can come down and talk at a committee meeting or something like that. And then afterwards, it's keeping that network alive to hold your elected officials, accountable to enforce these laws. To say, if the feds come into our town for whatever reason, and they want to use the military to indefinitely detain our U.S. citizens, you need to make sure you deal with this and protect us like you're sworn to do so.
I am the U.S. military. You are my prisoners. I don't care about your Constitution. You must kneel. I can detain you indefinitely without due process, only on suspicion, for as long as I want.
We are Occupy Eugene, and we stand behind the Liberty Preservation Act, where Oregon will declare that our Constitution will not be violated.
That's it for this episode. Thank you for joining us here on Occupy TV.
What democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Show me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Show me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Show me what democracy looks like. This